Today, we have a very special show. We will be speaking with a researcher turned serial entrepreneur turned biotech VC and a woman health startup founder who just raised $1.9 million US. And we also have a giveaway for our viewers. Welcome to Innovators, powered by Montreal New Tech. It's a show about people and organizations who are changing the world through innovative ideas, technology, and science. I'm your humble host, Valentin Kravchenko, and this is where normally I should insert a very clever anecdote about startups and myself. And, I decided to pick on my producer, so I just avoided also conveniently that whole part. Look, today we're talking about funding biotech innovations and kind of venture capital in that realm. And also we're lucky to talk to two experienced, very impressive scientists, entrepreneurs. So first, we have Michael Mee. He's principal at Amplitude Ventures. And we also have Marina Pavlovic-Rivas, who is co-founder and CEO of Eli Health. And we promised a giveaway, so here it is. Today, we're going to give away 2 tickets to Effervescence 2021. It's an award-winning conference about the future of life science coming up actually pretty quickly, March 15th. So there's going to be 12 captivating sessions, a virtual job fair, we love those actually, and B2B networking in attendance with Minister of Health, Social Service, Economy, Innovation, and several others. Sounds pretty neat, right? So how you do it? So 2 lucky Innovators viewers will have the chance to win a ticket worth of over $300. So the trick, sometimes during the show, we're gonna show a secret word. So I'll make sure to write it down, because then all you have to do is share this video on your social media and of course, share that secret word. And we'll send some spy along to make sure it's done, but you have to help us out and just tag Montreal New Tech so we can find it and validate it. So look, if you haven't done it yet, you know the drill with social media. You have to make sure to subscribe, that hit button. There's a whole team behind me working to making that show. I probably have just the easy part. So, if you watch until the end, if the guests were amazing for you, if that show provided you some value, just subscribe. So look, we have all those guests coming up. I'm pretty excited to get started. Don't miss the opportunity if you have any questions, to use aggressively this comment section. This is the fun thing of doing something live. If you ask a question, we'll intercept them and we will get to ask that question to our guests and you'll get your answer pretty quickly. So look, without further ado, let's get Michael on stage. So let's give a warm welcome, Michael. So you're principal at Amplitude Venture. Michael, I've been looking at your profile. You're definitely a lifelong truth seeker. Formerly, you actually, you know what? I don't know how you feel, but when I present someone and they're right in front of me, it always feels a bit awkward. How do you kind of like to see yourself these days?
Definitely as a truth seeker, more so on the sort of investor and sort of mentor side, and someone who's looking to really enable the life science ecosystem across the country, where we have sort of exceptional foundational technologies emerging from great entrepreneurs and trying to support that.
Yeah, and you have this interesting background where, of course, we kind of hinted about it, your background in research, but also as VC on the entrepreneur side, but you also moved geographically. What was your experience there?
Yeah, so for me, after spending originally from Montreal, but moved down to Boston to pursue sort of higher education, did my PhD in biomedical engineering down in Boston, and then sort of got bit by the startups bug, sort of launched my own project down there, my own startup, and eventually worked for the second half of the decade down there in life science venture capital. But for me, always knew a return home was a when question, not an if question, and really wanted to position myself to make an impact across the ecosystem to bring back what I learned about sort of the ambition, entrepreneurial spirit from the life science sort of epicenter of Boston, and bring it back to Canada and sort of the great innovators and entrepreneurs we have here.
So we'll definitely come back to that learning you've been referring to. And actually, I would like to kick things off, with a fun and warm kind of rapid fire questions. So here's the drill. Rapid fire question round. So your goal is to answer as many questions really fast. You have 2 minutes. Okay. So
Okay.
the current holder is Xavier from District 3 with 7 questions. And of course, at the end of the year, you may or may not get a trophy record. We're it's a very complex logistics. So, we're not going to make any promises here. But okay, are you ready?
I'm ready. Let's give it a shot.
Perfect. So 3 predictions for biotech in the next 10 years. Go.
Domesticization of supply chains, sort of continual emergence of sort of novel cell and biological therapies. And I think the next decade is going to be a decade of innovation in neuroscience and neurodegenerative diseases.
Neuroscience. Perfect. And designer babies. Yeah or nay?
Complex ethical question, but I tend towards nay. But I think
that's it. That's the cruel part of those most promising biotech company to watch.
Most promising biotech company to watch. Ooh, there are many.
Right now, just pick one randomly.
Radiant Therapeutics, based out of Toronto and Sick Kids University Tech, coming from Sick Kids.
Fantastic. Stem cells, good investment or ethical nightmare?
Very good investments, and they can be used both as discovery platforms, but also as therapeutics.
Okay, and biggest biotech myth that you keep hearing over and over again?
That the returns in biotech for investors are less than in tech.
Ah, nice. And okay, I want to know, how many more years before we all become cyborgs?
I think you're going to be waiting a while, Valentin. But there's some pretty exciting neural interface technologies that are emerging, some which are growing right here in Montreal.
Okay, so and it's very relevant to that question. How many number of hats do you have?
Right now,
I've heard about that passion of yours, and
I may have it for the rest. Oh, yours is good, Valentin. That's good.
And because this is the credibility we're going for. Okay, super fast. This or that. Pick up flat earthers or anti-vaxxer if you have to pick one.
Well, I'm definitely not an anti-vaxxer, so I guess I'll have to go for flat.
Pfizer or AstraZeneca?
Oh, am I out of time?
Yeah. Hey, 2 minutes. 2 minutes. I even prepped all those hats. So look, this is just to set up the pace, right? Thank you for playing along. So, we'll have a team of scientists who will compile that rigorous methodology, how many answers we estimate, and you'll hear back about it. So thank you again. And now let's take a bit of time. We skipped through a lot of things. Let's just unpack it all, okay? So, Michael, we actually talked about it a bit earlier on. You're originally from Montreal, but you left for quite a few years ago to study. Okay, that sounds like a good excuse, and to work in USA. And while you were actually away, you got busy. I have seen you made a PhD. You got busy there, and you were introduced there to the world of innovation and entrepreneurship. I'm curious, what was your experience there?
Well, it was fantastic. I think Boston truly is one of the sort of leading centers in the world for life science innovation, life science research. And I think one of the sort of biggest learnings that I had from the mentor that I had and my PhD advisor was that a lot of the problems that you can take on take about the same amount of time to overcome. And whether you think you want to sort of invent technology that will sort of totally be game changing and change the world, or sort of do research that's a little bit more marginal, it's going to be about the same level of difficulty. So might as well go for something that is really big and bold. And I think that's an element of the ambition that I'd love to try to push all entrepreneurs across our ecosystem to go for, where we need to have the courage to think much larger than sort of the plans that we're currently developing, much bolder, much bigger, to compete on a world stage.
So
So
talking about that courage, you actually went back to Montreal. Is this some sort of homing mechanism that we can activate remotely, or there was something you were looking for that you didn't find?
well, for me, call me maybe a bit of a patriot, but I will highlight that in both my academic and professional career, sort of launching a number of companies down in Boston,
Hmm.
every time we're sort of going through new ventures, we never wanted to repeat the same mistakes of others, and always found ourselves speaking to world leaders in their respective scientific domains, and found I was disproportionately speaking to Canadian investigators, Canadian researchers on a per capita basis.
Hmm.
And for me, that always spoke to the exceptional technology innovation that is stemming from our leading academic institutes across Canada. But
Hmm.
never saw the proportionate translation into world leading companies, and wanted to come back and try to push that in the right direction. So that was a bit the motivation for me. And I was very fortunate to be connected to a team at Amplitude Ventures that had that same mindset and investment philosophy and vision for how to drive the ecosystem across the country in that direction.
So let's talk about that potential and the realization, let's say, of that potential at Amplitude Ventures. It's a relatively new player, but honestly full of veteran talents. How do you go about identifying that potential and help that could grow and change the world, change the way we do business and we do research, let's say?
Yeah, well, a lot of it comes down to sort of the innovativeness of the technology, um, and matching that with a strategy that I'd say is a non-finite strategy. Right?
Hmm.
It is a strategy that is going for the infinite, trying to capture the full scope of value that
Hmm.
innovation can unlock. And that sounds very ambitious, and it is. And what these companies will ultimately end up doing is not achieving 100% of that, but a subset of that. But if you
Hmm.
start with your sort of initial goal of being a subset of that, you'll achieve a subset of even that, right? So that's why I think it's so important from the get-go to really drive for sort of what the full opportunity could be with the technology that you're starting from, and develop a very sort of refined strategy of how you're going to go about prosecuting the full scope of that in a very strategic way,
Hmm.
that is driven by data that you generate in the lab as you're sort of reading things out, but being very critical about what those data points are. I think the other thing that is critical to think about, and that I learned a lot in the US, is um, think very critically about what are the absolute killer experiments for each of those trajectories you could go down, and do them on day zero, because the biggest limiting reagent we have in life is time and energy to commit to projects. And the sooner you can dismiss small opportunities, the sooner you can move on to and do something game changing.
So actually related to that, and I like the fact you kind of started the idea of infinite game versus a finite game, right? In terms of ambition, scope, and also problems, probably, right? Is how, let's kind of talk a bit about those problems, because in practice, how do you divide between a very infinite goal, infinite game, dreaming big, and just something that is, overselling it? It's just, it is not connected to your understanding of what it could be possibly done. Because ultimately, you're betting on a radical, different future, right? But how do you kind of smell the snake oil in there?
Um, I like the concept of breadth and depth, where
Mm-hmm.
whenever you're developing one of these strategies, you need to prove out sort of the breadth and the
Mm-hmm.
potential to go broad and achieve that broad ambition by making one of the directions you're going very concrete, and sort of following that logical chain all the way, or as far as you can, given the current investment and capabilities to generate that data. And so I
Mm-hmm.
think pairing those two when you're developing a strategy is a really important way to not be in this constant hypothetical situation
Mm-hmm.
of what could be happening. But I do think it is very important to sort of ask those questions of what could we achieve,
Mm-hmm.
and would it be valuable if we improve this technology? And you need to start from that point as well of saying, what is the value there to society, to the healthcare system, that is going to be motivating spending time, resources,
Hmm.
and sort of building a team around sort of unlocking these challenges in a given area. And that sort of impact needs to be there, and you need to spend a lot of time validating that impact and then apply the right resources to solve the problem.
So that makes sense, right? If you want to have perspective, if you want to have more pair of eyes, ultimately, right, on the problem and an issue, you need talent. You need people with expertise to make sure that, as you said, that axe you're opening up. How do you right now? It's COVID. Everybody's kind of confined. How do you go and look for talents? For your team or to supplement, let's say, startups and such. How do you find the next big thing in the context? You cannot just go in the room now and just kind of get a feel of the room and the potential people there, candidates
Yeah,
there. Sorry.
well, I think we're all fastly and quickly adapting to virtual interactions, but I think getting engaged for people's ambitions, excitement, motivation, um, is actually pretty good over these platforms. I think for me the biggest struggle, and I'm sure others can relate and have their own concepts and areas where there have been sort of particular challenges, but sometimes what we do is just whiteboard concepts and
Hmm.
sort of map out and brainstorm. And I find that that's probably the hardest activity to take place virtually. And there are definitely tools for that, but nothing beats sort of being in the same room and sort of mapping things out, mapping out a strategy, sort of quickly
Hmm.
iterating on that on the same piece of paper with other members of your team. But from the standpoint of identifying concepts, I'd say despite being a new entry to the market and a new team on the market at Amplitude, um, I guess our name is somewhat getting out there, and we're having a pretty good time of having people come to us with concepts.
Hmm.
But we are very proactive as well. We're going to a lot of these virtual events, constantly connecting with researchers across the country. So it's both sort of good amount of inbound, but spending a lot of time sort of reaching out and identifying the opportunities that we're looking
I'm
for as well.
curious because I got that feedback sometimes that actually for some people, COVID helped them actually reach talent because suddenly it's not necessarily always limited to very physical events, right? You can suddenly attend a lot of those events, the price lowered, like the entry cost, the pool of talent. Is that something you experienced as well?
Yeah, no, I think that certainly has made it much easier. We're interacting now with sort of biotech clubs, tech transfer offices across the country,
Hmm.
um, in ways that we probably wouldn't have previously. I think
Yeah.
we always sort of chalked up plans, for example, of just to use an example, like going to Dalhousie and speaking to their sort of healthcare innovation, and you can do so virtually at the click of a button. So it's pretty nice way to do that.
Yeah, I definitely hope the whole virtual component, gets, people keep it in a, of course, kind of a hybrid model because that seems to provide a lot of access to everyone. Actually, I was looking at your cap and it says science, and one kind of a very narrow, like researchers work on very narrow, very specific research, right? The logic is often iterative. You take a body of work, you validate in different circumstances, so you have to build on others people's research, and we can even add that on top of that, you have to be validated by peers and regulators, right? So it becomes awfully very specific, awfully very quick. How do you dream big when you're so focused?
Um, so let me reflect on that a little bit, right? So I
Mhm.
think one of the challenges of making the biggest impact you can when you're coming from the standpoint of innovating on a technology
Mhm.
is you're often left sort of as a hammer, I like to say, as a hammer seeking for a nail, right? So you have your technology. I've been tethered to it as an academic inventing that, and I want to go find the best place to hit it. What often doesn't happen is once you identify that amazing problem space or application space where you want to apply the technology, is ask the critical question of, is this the best tool and best modality to solve that problem?
Mhm.
And researchers are generally sort of not doing that, and sort of entrepreneurs don't always do it either. And I didn't really encourage everyone to sort of take a moment to do that and ask, is this the best tool for this technology? And if the answer is no, go and find the best tool and go and translate that, because you now
Mhm.
have a great nuanced perspective on that application area. The other thing I'd say is I think a great way of starting to find that value is sort of, again, untether yourself from the need of that technology and sort of having a concrete technology in hand, but of saying, what if I could do something like this? Would it be valuable? And sort of really doing that validation of the application and the value of that future version of your technology that is currently hypothetical. And if you can convince yourself that it'll be valuable and do so very concretely, spend the time and resources and energy to build the technology that can get you there. And I think that's not always the approach that people take to sort of investing careers, years of their lives sort of developing these types of capabilities.
But it makes sense, as you kind of talked about it early on. You want to keep that perspective and validate as early as possible kind of possible roadblocks to make sure, as you said, ultimately, if the tech is not there and there's no alternative, worst case, you have to move on. I'm curious, as a PhD yourself and as a VC, do you have any time left to kind of stay up to date on all the academic life? Science is moving pretty fast, and it's sometimes in some fields really hard to catch if you're not following it diligently. How are you able to make it work, or you have to sacrifice a few things here and there?
Well, I think you always have to sacrifice, but I made that sacrifice to learn about other elements of the business and sort of how to think about commercialization of science. But I think everyone who's a nerd like me finds a way to stay relatively close to the science and also benefit from it's not just yourself that's combing through this literature. You have a community of close peers and sort of network of people that you work with that sort of highlight publications and papers. But then there's the broader social media community. And I think we all follow people on Twitter and sort of researchers that are constantly flagging interesting papers and innovations. So I think everyone has systems now to have a broad peer-reviewed sort of
and
approach.
Stay in that discussion. And so I'm curious related to that and what you kind of the sources you're connected to. It's a question we ask every time is, and it's a very personal one, right? What does ultimately innovation mean for you?
So first of all, it's a fantastic question, and I think there's sort of two forms of innovation, right? There's innovation that stems from I have a technology and I want to figure out how to apply it, and then there's innovation that stems from the world needs a solution to X or Y. Let's go and invent it. And I think I'm pushing much more for the latter, but both produce sort of exceptional companies. And
it's a personal answer, right? Ultimately, we talked about sacrifice. This is the thing you cannot sacrifice. What can you not sacrifice in your personal definition of innovation?
Impact, ambition. And so for me, innovation really, like the way I think of innovation and sort of the innovation that will ultimately be the most successful, attract a team around it, attract the resources around it to sort of drive it into reality, is innovation that is linked to ambition and non-marginal change to the world.
Fantastic. Look, I have a ton of questions. I can go for quite some time there. You just make it worse every time I want to ask more questions. But my producer is kind of just creepingly whispering me that we have to give a bit of time for the secret word. So Michael, hold on tight. I'll be right back.
I'm ready to write it down. Okay.
Perfect. So the secret word is femtech. So make sure to write it down. You know the drill. All you have to do to participate is, just share the video, one click, and just mention that word, femtech. And make sure to, of course, tag Montreal New Tech so we can track you and hunt you down and, not miss your post. So, by the way, huge thanks to Montreal In Vivo for donating those tickets. They're like a fairly nice value, and they're hosting the Effervescent Startup Pitch Contest, rewarding the winning teams with $30,000 in prizes. This is really nice. Michael is actually going to be one of the judges for this for the startups. So for those who are watching, you get a chance to get some insights into what Michael values. Specifically, we just talked about it. So maybe, just some insider knowledge so you can adjust a bit, maybe your pitch, why not? Hey, Michael, what's a quick piece of advice you can give to those who are pitching for startups?
Be very precise to those you're speaking to about the value and sort of the validation that you've had on sort of that value perspective of the technology you're bringing to the table. So I think the sooner you can sort of frame that side of the equation, then move into how. I think every time when you're pitching, you're telling a story, and you want to captivate the audience about sort of, this is the impact that we can make. Let me now tell you how.
Exactly. And this is, there's a science component. Don't play the marketing game. If you don't know. That means at least you will look for it. So look, applications are still open. You must, of course, submit by fax before, of course, it's digital. Everything's digital. But before Monday, February 22nd at 5 p.m. Eastern time. You just do it now. Honestly, it's always funny with those deadlines. You know how it works. People always wait last minute. Just apply now. By the way, check out the link in the comments. If you're watching that video, it'll send you right there. So look, as we discussed now is the audience time to shine. I've been seeing that number going up. There's a lot of comments, and I've been honestly been distracted by your comment, audience. So now I cannot take it anymore. Let's address them.
Hi. As a biotech startup, how do you deal with various regulations and red tape when you have a very small team? So if you need to do clinical trials or meet other standards, what do you do?
Great question. Critical part of what we do in our industry. Small team or large team, this is an essential part of getting products approved and getting products to market. So I'd say one critical aspect is be efficient in that process. Bring the people around the table, whether those are consultants, mentors, interactions with those regulatory bodies themselves, as soon as possible, and understand the means that you can do that. So with the FDA, for example, there's pre-IND meetings that you can start to engage with these regulators and understand the type of package and data package that you'll need to generate to move that forward. So just make sure that you're sort of constantly engaging with people who can advise on these sort of paths that you need to go through. And whether those are sort of your investors or speak to investors about getting in contact with those types of people as well. But that makes best use of your resources and limited budget and limited bandwidth to use your time judiciously to create the appropriate data package to move that forward.
Fantastic. And by the way, there's another video coming up right now.
Hey there, I'm Farah Bendamin from Montreal in Vivo, and also one of the organizers of Effervescence, which I'm really excited about this year, and of course the Open Innovation Afternoon that we're co-organizing with our friends at Montreal New Tech, and where, Michael, you're going to be one of our judges for the Startup Pitch Contest. So the question that I have for you is, when you're going to be looking at these 10 finalists that are going to be pitching, what is going to be the indicator to you that these startups or these teams are innovating not only more, but better? Thanks.
Wow, great questions coming all round.
Yeah, they're attacking you. Go ahead.
I know. For me, a key indicator of sort of how innovators are thinking is how people are matching the data that they're generating and the work that they're doing in experiments and proving out the engineering or biology that they're working on, and how that links back to the strategy to unlock value in the company. And sort of for me, that's sort of the sort of defining sort of piece for me, an element to me of sort of, does the innovator understand the critical elements of the technology to prove out, to show those value inflection points of the project moving forward. But fantastic questions all around. Yeah,
that makes sense. It's how you connect all those bits. Speaking of connecting bits, we asked Reddit on Reddit what are the questions about innovation, science, and tech. And I'm actually gonna ask our producer Dennis to come up and represent Reddit. Dennis, are you ready to represent Dennis?
Yes.
To represent Reddit, go ahead.
I'm definitely a very equivalent representation of Reddit, 100%. In 2021, this is Reddit right here.
You need to
this is exactly. So Michael, great to see you again. It's fun to be here on the show with you guys a little bit too. I'm always behind the scenes, clicking, changing things, hiding, whispering in Valentin's ear. But yes, today I want to bring up a Reddit question because we got a great one. It's a little bit of a tricky one, but I think it's going to make for a very curious discussion. So this one comes from Miss Micropipette from the biotech community on Reddit. So she was wondering, biotech has a topic that no one seems to want to talk about, the carbon footprint of biotech lab work. So that includes single-use plastic waste, intensive use of water and chemicals for cleaning. So you've been involved with biotech across 2 different countries, across many different startups, and as a venture fund person as well, who gets to see a lot of this happening. So what is your experience with that, and how do you think this issue impacts innovation?
So I think it absolutely impacts innovation. I think it's something where the government really has a role to play, right, in terms of setting policy on the types of materials that are allowed to drive that innovation of new opportunities and new options. But I think it's absolutely an issue. I'd sort of broaden it more generally, right? Like I think when more and more as an investor, we need to sort of present that we're thinking about ESG in every element of the investments we make. So environmental, social, and governance impact elements. And so I think just investing in healthcare, there's an element of impact on human lives that you make, but taking it to that side of what is the environmental impact of the supply chain, of how we're thinking about manufacturing these goods. When we're thinking about medical devices and as a product, are they single-use disposables that doctors and clinicians are using, or is there a way that we can make these devices much more environmentally friendly as well? So these are all elements that are coming to bear on decision making when we think about these challenges, not only in the wet lab space in terms of disposable plastics, but when we're thinking about medical devices moving into the clinic as well.
Do you have actually any idea of companies or startups that are maybe leading the charge in terms of worrying about the product life cycle or just having technologies related to that? Or nothing kind of comes up to mind right now?
Nothing is coming immediately to mind, but I would highlight that I think sort of groups are thinking about this, right? Like this is definitely a mind shift change in how we're thinking about developing these technologies.
So I'll ask maybe the audience, if you have an idea, just type it down in the chat, maybe tag those companies, and we'll have time for one last question from the audience. We'll let Dennis automatically display it on screen. So it's from Leela. Can you name some of those neural interface initiatives going in the market right now?
So there's one just broad group that integrates a lot of researchers operating in this domain that I highlight as NeuroTechX, and they operate across geographies, but they have a chapter based here in Montreal. There is a company that's pretty interesting that has their research initiative in collaboration with the Mila group called BIOS, BIOS. And they're sort of establishing these sort of very interesting electrical circuitry interfaces with our nerves, and sort of plugging into the understanding of the sort of much more nuanced understanding of how those signals interact, not just with what we sort of common understand as our skeletal muscular system, but there's so many other elements of our physiology that our nerves are being plugged into as well.
Wow. Okay, and same thing. If for those questions we didn't have time to tackle, you feel free to write them in the chat. And it's a community. There's always some nerds around there, or people know that field that they can answer from our guests or from just of course the viewers. So look, thank you for that. We'll come back right now. Just a quick promo for our newsletter. Hey, look, the startup space, let's face it, could be a bit confusing. So the team at Montreal New Tech had a secret plan for that. They're working on one newsletter weekly that does a nice recap, and all you have to do is you just subscribe to it, and every week they'll kind of keep you informed of what you should keep your eyes on, right? So without further ado, let's jump to our next interview with Marina from Ellie Health. Hi, Marina.
Hello.
So at Innovators, we believe that it's important to get the whole picture. So this is why we wanted to take some time to invite you, or in general, different guests to just kind of bring a different perspective. So in this case, Marina Pavlovic-Rivas, you're the CEO and the founder of Ellie Health. And before we start, it's actually quite funny. We studied in the same program. We come from the same school. we used to do video production, folks, believe it or not. Now I barely do any video. Okay, well, we're both in a video production setup. Granted, somehow it came back to haunt us. But what kind of change? Why you made that twist into entrepreneurship in science?
Well, after the program we did in communication, I did a master's in data science, and for me, it all comes from the same interest in information at the root. Communication is just a way to go get information, summarize it, share it. And data science, it's the same thing. It's just from another angle. So I was really interested in all those fields that can enable you to go get the information and do something with it. So it's just a complementary way of doing it in my perspective.
This is such a fantastic explanation. Communication is information, and when you're so focused on how you communicate information and make it accessible, and through that message. And speaking of that, so for example, women health have been underfunded and honestly under researched for such a long time. Where were we, for example, a few years ago in that field, and what is happening now?
Well, now it's starting to expand more and more, and the investments are starting to come in more and more. But to give you a perspective, for example, in 10 years ago, around 10 years ago, there was not really company startups in the women's health field, a few of them. In 2015, there was a 300 million investment in the sector. And now in 2020, there has been 800 million in the field of investment, and in 2025 there is a prediction that it will have 25 billion investment. So that's a huge boom.
It's a huge growth.
That is the prediction for the field, because it has been overlooked for so many years, and now people are starting to realize that it's actually a huge market.
Can you give me an example? Because this is the financial part means there's a need and there's some sort of level of maturity as a society, but through needs. What were for example, the consequences of the fact it was underfunded a few years ago versus what we do now?
Well, the main consequence it's that the women's health outcome are worse than the average health outcome. So, for example, for some conditions, perhaps you heard, but women have more chance of not surviving after a heart attack because the way it's treated. The research was not including properly a good proportion of women. So it makes that for the same conditions, sometimes women have worse health outcomes. And for some conditions that are affecting women specifically, that it's under research. So for example, there's PCOS affecting 1 in 10 women. And most women who has PCOS are learning about it when they're trying to conceive. But it means that for many, many years, they're living with some symptoms that are not being taken in charge. And we're talking just for that condition of 1 in 10 women.
Wow. So for context, what is PCOS?
It's a syndrome that affects your hormonal balance, to make it short. So for different things in the day-to-day, for example, weight management, that you are at higher risk of obesity. Some symptoms that you feel on the day-to-day, painful periods, for example, and that it's perceived as being part of the normal premenstrual syndrome, but it's not. So it's all caused at the root by a hormonal imbalance.
So it's a good example. We went into, for example, the whole information about, like if you want to have a representative model, you have to include all populations and be aware of that. And then we kind of move into, for example, for this of like hormones are an infinitely complex field that interacts with all the biomarkers you can track and etc. Let's talk a bit about Ellie Health and are you specifically disrupting the industry? Why helping a woman, for example, track and understand data about their hormones? Why do you think it's a game changer?
Well, when we started the company, the reason why we started is to offer a better contraception method. That was really what drove the creation of the company, because we were seeing so many women wanting to avoid hormones, avoid invasive devices, but still keep the effectiveness. And it's from one discussion to another that we saw with the existing evidence out there, by talking to physicians, that hormone monitoring was a good way to achieve that. And through those discussions, we quickly realized that by being able to measure hormones, you're able to empower women basically at every stage of their life, because hormones are the root of so many conditions and transitions that women experience, that once you're able to track hormones, well, it unlocks all of those solutions across a woman's life.
This is fantastic. It just opens up, once you track one specific type of hormones, you open yourself to track other types and just create that. This is actually fantastic for science, but also what it allows for everyone in there. Hey, Marie, those things are so cruel. We run fast, against the clock here. So I want to thank you for your insights. And but stay there. Next up, we'll bring Michael for a very special segment, innovator nomination. So stay around. So hi, I'm Marina and Michael. Most innovators know other innovators. They kind of stick, in groups, in little clusters. So whatever it's mentor, or you look, their mentors, or even a rival, let's face it. So every show we like to kind of dedicate a bit of time to hear, to hear about those other innovators that you connected to. So here's how it works. Who is your most innovative person or organization that you know and that you would like to nominate and hear from them in the future in these episodes, for example? Marina, we'll start with you.
That's a good question. In Montreal, I would say iFred Health. They had some great milestone recently, and outside of Montreal, there are some exciting things happening in contraception. For example, Your Choice Therapeutic, building contraception for men. So that's something to keep an eye on.
Okay, so hold that, because then we'll ask a question to them. And Michael, who you want to sacrifice, so we can ask them a question? What kind of very interesting person or organization comes in mind?
Yeah, I think we're in an age where AI is a very interesting technology and hot word, but I think applications of that to sort of advanced therapeutic development is really quite interesting, and we have a pretty exciting team that's developing here in Montreal at In Vivo AI that has a very interesting perspective on that, and has been working with sort of commercial groups to apply AI to drug discovery. So I think they'd be an interesting group to have on here.
In Vivo AI, so I use the term sacrificial, and you'll see how now you will not bear any consequences over this, but you can get to pick. So you picked one organization or person. Now you can pick a very tricky question. You can ask them, and that they'll have to answer, right? So Marina, what will be the very, if you pin them on a corner, I want an answer to this, what will be that question?
A tricky question, I don't know, but in terms of what we could ask them that could be beneficial maybe for the community is to learn more about their funding journey. They just raised a round, so to know what's the milestones they achieved to get there, and if they have any recommendation for other founders on that front.
That would be a fantastic, because we see those organizations getting through those rounds and get a bit of insights in that. Will be fantastic. And Michael, what will be your tricky question?
So there's lots of hurdles ahead for sure with companies like this, but I'd say I'd frame my question maybe from more of a business model standpoint and say, how are you planning to capture the most of the value as possible from the insights that you're generating and the new IP that you're generating? Sort of you can sort of work with partners, but how do you capture that for your own company?
Fantastic. And actually, I would like to extend the invitation to our lovely audience. If you know an innovator that you'd like to nominate, and maybe a tricky question, why not? Just super easy. Just tag them in the comment of the show. So look, before we wrap up, we'd like to take a moment to give you a chance to tell us, about your work. What are the kind of things we should keep an eye on? What are the projects that you're working on that we would like to maybe take a look? It's your time to. Marina, you have something in mind?
Well, we will be hiring for a few roles. So if you are looking for new opportunity, please reach out. Those roles will include biomedical engineering, business research around women's health. So please reach out.
Fantastic. Growing comes with its own set of problems. And Michael.
So one thing that we're kicking off at Amplitude right now is a new form of summer fellowship program, where we're very interested in recruiting in super ambitious, really smart PhDs, postdocs, MDs who are very deep in the life sciences, but very curious about learning about entrepreneurship and going down an entrepreneurship path. And what we'll be doing through the fellowship program is thinking about developing strategic plans and vision for early stage companies in the biotech industry that may ultimately end up being launched with Amplitude or through Amplitude. So this could be an opportunity of seeing that process, getting in at the ground floor into some of these companies, or sort of even joining the Amplitude team as well.
Fantastic. Look, thank you for coming to the show. I truly appreciate your time and your insights. It's always nice, and we'll keep you posted on trying to fish those insights and questions for you. And of course, take a look at the organizations of our guests. They're working on fantastic things. And again, thank you so much. So on our last episode, we asked our guests, Xavier and Ludovic and Joel, who they would like to nominate as an innovator. And today, there's a great news. We're very excited to share with you their response of their nominee. So, you know what, Dennis, take the mic.
Vincent, really great to have you here. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Last time we ran an episode with Xavier and Ludovic and Joel. You were nominated by two of our guests. So it's very cool that we have you here today to actually respond to the questions that they proposed that we ask you. So without further ado, first question. If a person wants to become an entrepreneur and create a startup, what can they do as a researcher and innovator? So the researcher who is kind of considering the idea of becoming an entrepreneur, how do they do that?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. It's quite a surprise when I found out that both Joel and Xavier nominated me. It was great to see them, and it was very flattering as well. So how do you do that? I don't think there's a one recipe or one solution for that. But I can talk about me and my experiences. The first and most important thing is in your research, you really have to want to make a difference. And you want that difference to go beyond the ivory tower, right? I mean, I know I make a difference. We all make a difference as a researcher within the walls of our institution. But outside the walls of the institution is where the real world happens, and you want to be able to make a difference there. So things like focusing on real problems and real issues, and looking for solutions that will make a difference to society at large is really one of the pillars that drives a lot of entrepreneurs. They're unlike what a lot of people think. It's not money. It's wanting to see changes and wanting to see technology evolve that go out there and help people and help societies as a large. So to me, it's I mean, I can almost bring it down to, we can do a lot of discoveries and a lot of research, but if it ends up on a shelf in the library, there's no point.
Wow, so that was a short excerpt from the interview of our producer Dennis that he had with Vincent Martin. He's actually a PhD and professor at Concordia University. He's a research chair there in the microbial engineering and synthetic biology. So look, if you want to see more, keep an eye on our social media. I will post the whole thing there, and keep an eye for those nominee interviews. That's our plan. We're trying to fish those answers. So look, there's one last piece of amazing news that we'll like to share with you, all the biotech lovers out there. So coming up, actually, we hinted about it maybe here and there in social media, but on March 17th, there's a Creative Collision event. Now, there have been a few Creative Collisions events that Montreal New Tech did in the past, and people keep asking about when is the next one. Okay, you got it, March 17th. So look, the topic this year for this edition, sorry, is the tech and collaborations that will shape the future of life science. So look, it's an awesome panel. There are reverse pitches. We do love them. And it's all for free, typical Montreal New Tech fashion. So look, if you want to learn more, just look at the links in the comment. And you know what? Did you enjoy the show? Did you share the episode? We all about science and biotech enthusiasts out there. If you love that content, you know what? If you're still watching this after all that time, I kind of bet you liked it. You know what? Super simple. All you have to do is just tag the friends that you know will love this content and reshare within your network. I think those interviews were fantastic, and I really would like to see more pair of eyes and opinions and people to challenge them. So you know what? Thank you for turning in for Innovators, powered by Montreal New Tech. We hope you enjoy the show, and you are part of the success. So share the word. Take care.